Hi, and welcome to the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast, where we help you understand how your past painful experiences are affecting your current reality and how you can shift those so you can create your desired future. I'm Dr. Lee, and both myself and our team at the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety are excited to support you on your journey. We talk about all the things on this podcast. No topic gets left uncovered. So, extending a content warning to you before we get started. If you notice yourself getting activated while listening, invitation to take care of yourself and to pause, skip ahead a bit, or just check out another episode. Let's dive in. Hey y'all, welcome to season 4, episode 1, the season on leadership. And I'm really excited today because I feel like I say that every single episode, but I'm always excited. I guess that's a good sign, right? Mm-hmm. I just monkeyed my guest who had a hair in his beard. If you're listening and not watching the video version of this, I have the one, the only TLC, my husband. Hello. With me. We're both exhausted.
Yes.
There's a lot of stuff happening in our world right now, which is kind of great because, you know, I actually asked TLC if he would come on this episode with me around leadership because I wanted to, well, first of all, he's been on an episode in every single season so far. So there's that.
Yeah. Gotta get at least one.
Yeah, you gotta get at least one. 2, it was important to me to have him on because, you know, part of the reason that I wanted to focus in on this is that something TLC and I have really been working on is self-leadership and leading ourselves and also like leading our kids and me being led by him, which I am getting better at. So I asked him, I said, hey, you know, can you come on the episode? And we were talking about what we wanted to do. And I said, oh, you know, it'd be really fun is I've never been interviewed on the podcast by anybody. So, you know, the business in and out, you know me, we've been together for like over 18 years. What if I have you ask me questions about leadership? And then that'll be like a really fun way to kick off this season because people love you, TLC.
Yeah, I thought that sounded fun, you know, Get a couple questions ready to go. And in a cold read, you've not heard any of these questions. So
I don't know any of the questions, which is scary and also fun. I trust you. Okay, so the thing I want to say just before this too is this season is going to feel fundamentally different. And so that's also one of the reasons I want to do the episode like this, because we're going to start having different conversations. And a lot of this has been me interviewing people or asking them about their personal journeys, or it's been me talking about my personal journey. And I really want to start shifting things around a little bit to asking people about not just their journeys, but how they are creating psychological safety and bringing trauma sensitivity and trauma responsiveness into not just leading themselves, but leading other people in that way, leading other people towards safer, more supportive, more enjoyable and mutually beneficial spaces where people feel like they can be more themselves. So yeah, did I already cover like 3 of the questions that you have?
No, just skip around a little bit.
Okay, okay. All right. I am letting go of the reins and TLC is in charge because I trust him implicitly.
All right. Mm-hmm. So I guess first question here I got down was, when did you feel like you were destined to be a leader? Or did you?
That's a great question.
Yeah, was it more like with nursing wise earlier on? Were you in leadership type positions? Or
I feel like once I got into, well, even in high school, I was a leader in some places. I was just thinking about it. I was captain of the bowling team. Yes. Come bowl with me. I'm good. I was co-captain of the bowling team. I was the field commander for the band my senior year of high school. So I was the one who was up there. We had a really big band too. We actually won first place at our last band competition and we beat out a school that was like 3 times bigger than us. And they were really mad for our field commanding, which was cool. I don't think I've ever shared that anywhere. What else? Oh, I was captain of the flag color guard for 3 years, freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So it's funny because I'm like, oh, I haven't really led, but I've led a lot. The jobs that I had, a lot of times I'd end up moving up pretty quickly. So my first college job ended up being second college job. Actually, I got fired from Cold Stone. No, I didn't did I get fired? No. Oh, that was back in my very irresponsible days where I forgot to show up for a shift. And then I was like, forget it. I'm just not working there anymore. I don't act like that anymore. But that was 18-year-old me. I
forgot all about that, honestly.
Yeah, they called me and they were like, are you coming in? I was like, no, I think I quit. This job kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And the reason that I didn't want to work there anymore was because their leadership was really bad. It was a family that owned it, and they were all like super they fought, and they had different ideas of how the store should be ran. And the son owner was kind of a little friendly and to me, and his wife didn't really like that. And so I quit. But anyway, my second job, I worked at the student computer centers, and I worked my way up to manager there.
Student manager, one of only a couple.
There were 4 of us, and there were over 100 people that worked there. So something that's interesting coming out of that, I actually, before I left the bedside back in 2020, I was offered the lead NP position for the nocturnal, which would have been with like 15 plus nurse practitioners, somewhere around there, maybe 10, I don't know, but I actually turned it down because I was like, that's not the direction I want to go. But I remember we had a pretty significant conversation around it of like, this would be a really good leadership opportunity and you'd move up in the system. So I don't think I've ever seen myself as a leader. And one of the things I know is that if I see a vacuum or a gap in leadership, like where things are not being done right, like where nobody's in charge, or where things are just kind of like wobbly or wonky, I cannot help but step in. Like, in fact, the TSA line at the airport completely dysregulates me because I get so frustrated. I'm like, this could be so much more efficient. Like this person could be over here, and like you two need to be split up. And like I want to make it run more smoothly. I want it to feel better for everybody involved. And so I think it's just part of my personality that if there's something that I feel like could be done better and no one's doing it, I want to do it. And that got me into trouble a lot too. So, but also the people who have valued that, like the people who have seen the benefit in that and really fostered it and like created safety for me around that, like I was a really good leader for them. I was a really good employee for them.
Took me a little while to realize that, but I've noticed when there's a line for something, lines don't seem to bother you when they're inevitable. But when it's due to inefficiency, or when you can tell, like, if they did it this way, everything would go so much smoother. That's when it's hard for you to like.
It's the autism. Like, I say that jokingly, but it really is. That's the autism. I can see in my head. It's a puzzle. That's one of my favorite things to do is puzzles. It's a puzzle, and I'm looking at it, and it's so clear to me which pieces are out of place and which pieces need moved around, and like you need to shift your position so you can look at something differently. And so when people don't value that, and they're like, oh, you're questioning things, oh, you're a troublemaker, oh, you're trying to like stir up stuff, I'm like, no, I am trying to understand why we are doing things in a way that doesn't make sense. I'm not trying to like be a jerk. I am actually trying to help. And the leaders, the people who led me, who understood that. In fact, that's something you and I have been working through. I feel like that's a recent thing of like, you understanding that when I question you, it's not coming from a place of like, I don't trust you. It's coming from a place of, I don't understand, the puzzle pieces aren't fitting. And so could you please help the puzzle pieces fit so that I can go hard in the paint for you. And I can be like, I'll follow you to the end.
Once you and I especially made that, realization there, that really helped me to be able to lead easier, because I think in some ways it was kind of one of those, I'm like, well, if you trust me, why is it you question, a lot of different, and it's one of those, I'm like, I don't. And then when I realized, no, you're not questioning it. You just want to know the backstory. If you understand the reasoning and the rationale, it makes it so much easier for you to go along with, which makes sense. But in my brain, it at least initially didn't. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like,
well, and I think that's what a lot of the people who I answered to or reported to that didn't see me as a valuable leader, I think that's the thing that got really frustrating for them, because they thought I was like trying to usurp them or question their judgment. And it wasn't that. I was like, it's hurting me. It's causing me physical pain to do something that doesn't make sense.
That could be done so much better.
That could be done so much better. And by the way, that's actually why I left the bedside, because I was starting to see systemically, I'm like, people are traumatized, people are like not okay. And I really want to be able to help them. And the system is telling me I cannot do it. And in fact, if I do it, I'm going to get in trouble. And I remember I came home from one shift and I looked at you in the face, right? And I said, I'm either going to get fired or I'm going to lose my nursing license, and not for doing something quote unquote wrong, but doing something that's against the rules that I don't agree with. Yeah. And you were like, yeah, we got to get you out of there.
Yeah. Nursing versus, university policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being like, oh, you can't prescribe this medication, or you can't do it this way, or you can't do it that way. And I'm like, that doesn't make why. Yeah. And nobody could tell me why, because that's the way it is.
The best case practice.
It's the best practice. But I'm like, the thing that you can say to me to cause me to use the most of my nervous system regulation tools that I will ever use, like the thing that just really dysregulates me so much, is when people say it is what it is.
Yeah. I've noticed, I figured that out myself here. If I say, well, it is what it is.
I'm like,
and it's like,
or it doesn't matter. When you say it doesn't matter, I want to throw things because I'm like, it does matter, because we could just shift this or shift that. Like, there's a way to make it better. Yeah. So us just being like, it is what it is. This is how we do it. There's no better way to just get me to fight somebody.
True.
Okay, I think I give you a really long answer.
No, you give a great answer. I mean, and so kind of tailing along with that, then, you felt like you had a lot of the natural characteristics and stuff to be a leader. So is it something that anybody can become a leader, or, if they really want to work at it, or is it better maybe for some people to not try and be a leader?
I think the saddest thing, and also the most damaging, and I think this is intentional in a lot of places, but the most damaging thing we do is we teach people that leaders are the people at the top. Leaders are the people in the front. Leaders have specific degrees. Leaders have specific titles. Leaders have specific certifications or qualifications. They have specific authority. Because to me, the definition of leadership is that you move towards an objective, right? You go on a journey in a way that is in integrity with your organization, or with whoever you are leading, with the people and resources you have. I actually get that from the books right here. William McRaven, Admiral William McRaven. He talks about it. He's the guy who wrote Make Your Bed. And I just finished his book like 5 minutes ago on Wisdom of the Bullfrog. And he talks about that, of use the resources and the people you have to try to achieve an outcome, or go on a mission, go on a journey, and do so within integrity, in alignment with the organization. And so every single person can be a leader, right? Because every single person has at least one person that they can lead, which is themselves. And I think that we don't teach people that they can lead themselves.
Yeah.
And me learning that, going, oh, I don't actually, me questioning other people is not a bad thing. And I can choose to direct myself and use the resources that I have at my disposal towards an outcome that I'd like to go on, and make sure that the journey feels the way that I want it to feel. And I can make sure that that is in alignment with my morals and my ethics and my values and the laws. So yeah, I think everyone is a leader. Everyone's leading themselves. It's just, are you owning that you're leading yourself, or you're like, oh, other people are leading me? And I say that kind of sarcastically, but a lot of times we do that. We're like, oh, other people are leading me. Other people have power over me. Other people, and that can be true. You still are able to lead yourself.
Yeah, multiple levels.
Yeah. Other people can be leading you, and you can decide, do I want to let this person lead me? Right? People say, oh, my boss is such a jerk, but he's the man in charge. And it's like, are there ways for you? Do you have resources at your disposal that if you used them, you could maybe shift the way that relationship feels? You could shift the way that you're able to move with that leader, or you could quit and go somewhere else and find somebody that you do like being led by. That's self-leadership. Am I choosing to stay here? Am I choosing to move? What decisions am I choosing to make? And I would say that that's probably been my biggest growth space over the last year, is how do I lead myself? And then also, how do I let myself be led? And I think for a lot of people, they absolutely have the ability to be a leader. It's just they've never asked themselves those questions because no one's ever asked them those questions.
Yeah.
They don't even know they can ask themselves those questions. So that's part of this podcast series too, is everyone's a leader. It's just, are you owning it or not?
No, I think that's really fascinating. It's not something, I've always kind of wondered that, how it's like, how do you determine who should be the leaders or what?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it totally flips that. That's fascinating. I love that.
Well, and when you look at our team, right? Our Institute team, there's 9-10 of us at this point. We all lead in different ways. And there is nobody that is quote unquote in charge, right? At the end of the day, I have the highest amount of responsibility because I am the one who owns the business. So I have to own that, right? I am the one who ensures everyone gets paid. I am the one who ensures that our doors stay open, all of those pieces. So at the end of the day, I have the highest level of responsibility and accountability. I do not have the highest level of leadership. We're all leading. And that's something really big. And I did not realize this until just recently. The people that we have on our team all are proactive in leading. They go, hey, there's a problem here. This is what I think we should do about it. Or, hey, this is something really cool that I saw. And how do we incorporate this in? Everyone on our team is actively engaged in the journey and the outcome that we have for the organization, which is to create safer, more supportive spaces, mutually beneficial relationships. Everyone's on board with that. And no one on our team at this point is afraid to be like, Lee, I don't know that that's the right call. I'm not afraid to go to the team and say, hey, I don't know the right answer here. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling. What do y'all think and feel? And I've never been on a team like this. And everyone who's on our team, I mean, you're on the team.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of teams run like this.
No. And if I'm being honest, I think it does take a strong leader in general, because it is something, if you have a lot of people giving out their advice at all times, it can, I've been in places like that where there was a weak leader, if you will, who just kind of sat back, and a lot of stuff didn't really get done because everybody would kind of have different ideas and nothing would be decided. You know what I mean? But I think that's one of the cool things about this. It's like, no, here's what we're going to do. And it is somewhat of a consensus, but it is each person being able to look at a situation and be like, okay, here's what I think we need.
Yeah.
And like being able to then run with that. I think it's so much more of an efficient type way than having to, either wait for one person to okay everything or have nobody there to be over, at least paying at least some attention, like you said, having that responsibility, and people just kind of, because I've been in places where it's like people go all 6 directions and get half stuff done and nothing really gets finished.
And I honestly think that's why we've had the growth that we've had, because we are all very unified in what we're doing, and all of us care about ourselves, and we own that. I went to a team member recently and said, hey, I want to give you a raise. I'm really big on giving people raises before they ask for them, because if somebody's already coming to you asking you for a raise, they already feel undervalued. Give your people raises before they ask for them. Big thing for me. So I was like, hey, I think, you need a raise. And also, would you like more hours? I'm seeing that. I think this would be a thing. However, I think we need to wait probably until August to do that piece, or until a couple months. And this person was like, look, my priority is my family. And so I got to look at it and make sure that these hours are going to fit in right. So like, let's run some calculations. Let's also make sure that you paying me more hours, like, are you sure that's good from a cash flow perspective? And so many other places, people would be like there'd be leaders that would be like, are you seriously going to ask me if this is okay from a like there's a lot of ego involved. And for me, I'm like, man, I love that my team, our team, that they feel safe enough to be like, look, I don't necessarily want more hours because my family's more important to me. Our institute should not be more important than your family. It's not more important than my family. I said this to you last week. I said, if I have to choose between the institute, which like really, this does feel like my life's work, but if I have to choose between the institute and our family, that if I have to burn this business down to ensure that my family is even like a modicum of a little bit better, done. And I don't want any employee feeling like they cannot say the same thing, or any team member feeling like they can't say the same thing. So I share that because we should be able to question. And I really think that everybody on the team should be looked at as leaders. And I do believe that the CEO, the founder, that whomever the positioned
Mm-hmm.
person is from a leadership perspective, they should be setting that standard.
Mm. Well, kind of talking here on the team, one of the questions I had here too is, leading such like a dynamic team like ITPS, what feels the most rewarding?
Mm. I mean, yeah, I
Is
think
it kind of what
it's kind of what we were just talking about. And
Mhm.
also, everybody's doing what they're really passionate about.
Mm.
I would say every 6 months now, we and Sarah, our ops director, we are starting to do this on a quarterly basis, but every 6 months, we are looking at what people are doing and asking ourselves, are they in their zones of genius? So, when you're first starting a business, a lot of times you're the only person and you're doing all the things. And so you're doing a lot of things that aren't in your zone of genius. And let me define that for people.
Mhm.
Your zone of genius, this comes from a book from Gay Hendricks called The Big Leap. Your zone of genius is the thing that you are so good at that you love doing. It's that simple. It's like, I'm in a category of one. Nobody doesn't like me and nobody enjoys doing it like me. So we're trying to make sure that people are in their zones of genius, because as you grow, you can't do all the things. And so when you're bringing people in to help you, we should be giving things to people that it's their zone of genius. And we recently had this. We really looked at it and we're like, we got a couple of people in places where they're in their zone of excellence. And the zone of excellence is below the zone of genius. The zone of excellence is I do it well. I do it really well. People notice it. I get good results. I don't mind it. It's actually, it's cool. It's cool. If I did this for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be disappointed. Mm-hmm. That was nursing for me. Mm-hmm. And so the zone of excellence is a trap because it's not really where you're supposed to operate. You should spend like 80% of your time in your zone of genius. But the way that our society is set up, that most of the time we spend very little time in our zone of genius. And so that is probably been the most rewarding thing, is watching team members just utterly geek out in our Slack channel over the things that they're getting to do. And they're so happy and they're so excited. And they know that if there's something they're doing that they're not enjoying, or that they're like, yeah, I'm like good at it, but I want to do something, they know they can come to us and be like, hey, next review, next evaluation, next quarter, can we look at that? Because I really think I could be doing this. Mm-hmm. And also that's important because we're all growing and we're all learning. So sometimes you don't even know that something is your zone of genius until you get offered the chance to do it, or you see someone else doing it and you're like, oh, that's it. And so it gives us also an opportunity as a team to grow and then redefine what that zone looks like, what those zones are.
That's awesome. Yeah, I do remember when you were being a nurse, one thing that you probably have noticed about Lee before, she tends to be very humble with things. But you were an outstandingly gifted nurse. And I do think some of that, like you were saying, was zone of excellence. It was something you were really good at, but it wasn't something you absolutely loved. So I think that did kind of help keep you there maybe even a little longer, because it's like, oh, how many blood draws have you failed on? Oh, that'd be like 0. How many?
I failed on. Hold on.
Bone marrow biopsies.
You're right. I never had an unsuccessful bone marrow biopsy. Which, if you don't know what that is, don't go look it up.
No,
you will
it sounds
regret
terrifying to me.
It involves really big needles, like needles that look like knitting needles. But yeah, I was really good at it. But part of the reason I was really good at it was because I didn't follow all the rules. Like I didn't break the rules, but I also did it differently than how they taught us. I found the most efficient and effective way, which also involved me like literally getting in the bed with the patient, but not in sort of like bad way. But I would have my knee up in the bed and my students would watch me and they're like, this is weird and wild. And they're like, also, it really works. Yeah. And but that was it, right? It was like, I loved procedures. And that was actually one of the reasons I left too, because I loved procedures and I could do procedures and I was really good at procedures. And they were like, by the way, you can't do procedures anymore because your collaborating physician doesn't do procedures. So you can't do procedures. And I was like, okay. So I remember there were nights that I'd be on call and somebody would need a central line, like a really big IV in their neck or in their groin. And I could do that. Or somebody would need intubated, they need a breathing tube put in. And I could do that. I knew how to do that. I would have to wait and I would have to beg. I would have to call like 6 different doctors and beg them to come do these procedures. And they're like, don't you know how to do this? I'm like, I do know how to do this. I'm not allowed. And so that's also something that's really rewarding for team, is like, there's nothing that they're not quote unquote allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do something that I'm like, I don't know that was the best idea, it's actually been really great for me to kind of step back and go like, okay, that's not the way I would have done it. Did it work?
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way I would have done it. Is it effective? Is it in alignment with the integrity of the institution, the organization? Because if so, I don't have to like it.
Mm-hmm.
Does it work for them? And that's been a really cool growth edge for me too, to like be able to be the leader for them that I didn't have, and to really allow them to practice, to use nursing terms, to their full scope, and not be like, oh, that's not in your job description.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always driven me crazy, be it with unions or anything like that, where it's like, oh, that's not your job. You can't really do that. And it's like, but I'm right here. I could do it real quick. And it's like, no. And I understand, especially when it comes to unions, that I understand why people do that. But that was always one thing when I used to work at a union, non-union factory, they would just drive me crazy. I'm like, I'm standing here with the paint can.
Yeah.
I can't just paint. And they're like, no, union job. And so it's like, in some ways I feel where it's like, I could just do it. It could be done. The efficiency is.
May I add something that's, I know you have questions, but you're really sparking my brain here.
Yeah,
May I add something?
Go for it.
This reminded me of something about the Institute. Our priority is we're honest, we're kind, right? Honest, kind. And we really prioritize justice and inclusion, and not from not a performative space, not inclusion like, oh, everybody gets to be here. Not that. We actually have very fierce boundaries to protect the people who come in. But what we don't have is barriers that prevents people from joining. Mm-hmm. So anyone can come into our space, and that space is sacred. That space is really important to us. So we're going to set standards for that space. And if those aren't followed, then we're going to have a conversation with you. And if they're not followed again, we're going to have another conversation. And then if they're not followed again and we can't like figure out why, then we're going to ask you to go. Mm-hmm. I say that because I see so many organizations that if I said, what are the values you follow? Their people would not be able to tell you what they are. And I worked for a university connected to a hospital system. And when I started working for that organization, I was in the community hospital that they have. The community hospital is not unionized from a nursing perspective. That community hospital, one of the things that I could tell you is that what was priority was the patients feeling like they were in their community, like the hospital was serving the community. So we treated everyone who walked in those doors like friends, like people we cared about. I remember watching the chief nursing officer. First of all, we called the chief nursing officer Mary, right? We called everybody by their first names most of the time. The doctors a lot of times were by their first names. There wasn't so much of a hierarchy. And when I remember watching this, the chief nursing officer, one of the top positions, walk a patient who looked lost to their appointment. And I remember that somebody saying, yeah, that's what we do here, right? If somebody's lost, we help them get where they're supposed to go. Even if you were doing something else, even if you were on your way somewhere else, even if you're late to a meeting, it's fine. If you're late to the meeting, just let us know. I walked a patient somewhere. Good, great, cool. I was helping someone. Fine. You relate to your shift. Shifting over to the bigger non-community, like state, on campus, that hierarchy definitely started showing itself. And that hospital, in order to walk from one end to the other, and they've actually even expanded it, so it's going to take even longer now. I can't even imagine. To walk from one end of the hospital, the parking garage, to the other end of the hospital was a 13-minute walk. And it was all these zigzags and turns. And I'm kind of feeling emotional about this because, I remember it was so confusing. I still didn't know how to get some places after 10 years. And you'd have patients come in and they'd be confused. And if they asked where to go, sometimes they'd be looking all around. You know what it looks like when somebody's lost. Yeah. And people would just walk straight by them. Or maybe somebody would stop and say like, hey, where are you trying to go? And they say, I'm trying to go here. Oh, okay. So you're going to go down this hall. You're going to take a left. You're going to take a right. You're going to take another left. You're going to take an elevator up to the 6th floor. You're going to walk across the hallway, and then you're going to take that other elevator up to the 10th floor, and then you'll find it. And I remember I watched somebody somewhere and I was late, and they were like, where were you? And I was like, I was walking someone. They were like, you walked them all the way there? And I was like, yeah, they were lost.
No.
And they were like, okay, but like, I want to give you a report. I want to leave.
No.
And you're late. And it was just so much of that. Again, that system was one of the best systems I've ever worked in. There were people that I absolutely loved working with, patients, mentors. Like I'm not actually dogging on the system itself, because I know the humans there were doing the best they could. I am lamenting the fact that as leaders, we were like, yeah, we're cool with this. We are cool with saying that we really deeply care about people and we really value, like everybody should be treated the same. And there's no such thing as a VIP patient. And yet, don't call a doctor by their first name. Don't call me doctor, because I'm not a physician. And that's, what did they say?
Confuse the patient.
It would confuse the patients.
Semantics to me, but
yeah. How dare you tell people you're more educated
right?
than they think you are, right?
Oh, geez.
No, it's
not like you're saying, I'm going to be performing your surgery today.
Yeah.
It's, I'm Dr. Lee, I'll be your nurse today.
Right.
I don't think people would confuse that, but
it's not confusing. But anyway, I kind of went off, I got on a soapbox there, but like really from a leadership perspective, your customers, your people know. They can feel when what you say are the values and the ethics and the mission of the institution or the organization. When you say that's what it's about, and yet it doesn't feel like that, people can tell.
Employees can too, I think.
Employees can tell. One of the things we've been talking about, and we're going to talk about in our conference in November. So we're having, it's called the Create Leadership Conference, November 9th through 12th here in Columbus, Ohio.
It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be amazing. 100 leaders max. And again, anyone can be a leader. So if you're like turned on by this conversation, you probably belong at the conference, and you can find details on our website. So at that conference, one of the things that we're going to be talking about is there's 4 tiers of, we talk about retention a lot. There's 4 levels of retention that when you look at retention, you want to think about. There are employees who leave, right? Employees who they're like, I'm out. The second I can leave, I'm out. You have employees who are not leaving. And what I mean by that is that they want to leave, but for whatever reason, they're not, because of circumstances or whatever, but they're done, but they haven't left. They're not actively planning to leave.
Quiet quitters.
Yeah. Like they quietly quit. Sure. Yeah, that's actually perfect. They quietly quit, and they're just like, if something else better comes along, they are gone in a flash. They will not give you 2 weeks. They don't care. Like they're out. They are emotionally out. They're no longer invested. And then the 3rd level is employees who stay. And staying is not the same as the 4th level, which is thriving, right? Employees who stay, they're not quiet quitters, but they'll do their job. They're not going to go above and beyond. They're not going to innovate. They're not going to walk somebody down the hall, right? They're going to tell people where to go. They're going to show up. They're going to do good work. They're going to go home.
Hit their 40 hours.
Hit their 40 hours. They're out. Finish their shift. They're out. But they will do good work while they're there. But we want people who thrive. People who are like, when they wake up, yeah, sometimes you have a bad day. Sometimes I don't want to go to work, right? But like once I'm in it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I love to do. And people who are referring and talking positively about their work and who are excited to come to work. And you talked about one of my most, like, what's been the most rewarding piece. People are excited to work for us and with us. And I don't even say for us, because it's not for us. People are excited to work with us. They're excited to be part of our team.
Yeah, it's really nice, both sides, people coming in and people, it's when people want to be there.
Yeah.
And they're excited to be there. A whole different, feeling than, a job where people have to be there. It's, I have to support my family. I got to, work the line.
Yeah.
It's like, even when they're doing it well, if they're not loving it. Yeah. You talk to those people and it's like, how's work? It's the same, it sucks. It's this, it's that. It's like, yeah, they don't seem that excited about it. I know the kind of people you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, they're there. They're going to show up Monday through Friday. They don't miss days. They don't do anything, but
they're like, just a job. Yep. And I think the sad piece is, I am completely screwing up your questions right now.
Nah, you're fine. Everybody's got through something.
Okay, that's good. I think the sad part is like the really sad part is not just from the loss of productivity. It's not just the loss of all these things, but you talk about me being humble. I'm gonna not be humble for a second. I was a really good employee.
Mm-hmm.
I was a really good employee. And I wanted, you remember when I started there, like I wanted so badly to innovate and to do things. Like I got my doctorate there. I implemented an entire like policy shift. And I remember the whole time feeling like, I don't know that anybody else cares about this as much as I do.
Mm.
I know, like, I'm not going to say people don't care about their patients or things like that, but I don't know that anybody else really cares about how do we make this a lot better. And there were a couple of my fellow colleagues that were like that. I think a lot of us were like that in the beginning.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's so much red tape and there's so much bureaucracy and there's so much. I used to joke that things that should take 3 steps in 3 months took 10 steps in 10 months because you had to have all of these different things in. And it's like, we as leaders have way more capability than we give ourselves credit for, especially in positions like that. And there have to be several of you working together in order to facilitate those systemic changes. And if you're trying to do it alone, you can't do it. But I feel like on the academic side, that was actually fun because I was given a lot more freedom over there. I completely shifted how we did courses. I did some things. I was like, I'm asking for forgiveness and not permission here. And they were like, as long as it works, like, and that there was a lot more freedom over there.
Yeah.
The thing over there is I was leading people who didn't want me to personally lead them.
Yeah. Or, you know, you're the teach, you know, it's not everybody's going to be.
No, you're teaching people who aren't necessarily excited that you are the one teaching them.
No, they just need the sheepskin. Not as much. They're excited to hear from you.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of students would be. I mean, you'd have a lot of students come back. Like you said, a lot of people give you 5s, but then there were some people who were not.
Oh, when they'd rate me?
Oh, yeah. We're not quite, you know, they did not dig your personality wise because you were very open and honest. It wasn't the.
Oh, yeah. I was like, y'all, I'm not going to, I said, I know some of you want to learn this and we're not going to learn this here. And here's why. And I did. I would explain it. But the same people who the leaders didn't like when I questioned things, oftentimes people who are like, oh, but this is the way you're supposed to do it. It is what it is. And students were like, you're not doing it is what it is. And that feels scary or uncertain. And that's part of what I've realized is that they felt uncertain. And I've really shifted now teaching a lot of people, really shifted in how do you create certainty when you're teaching in uncertain ways? How do you create certainty when you're leading in ways that people have never been led before? That is super important. People need to know this may feel scary to you and I'm not scared. So you may have never gone or looked at this thing or turned over this rock and looked at this trauma or done these things. And I'm not scared. Whatever we find under there, I'm not scared.
So one question here. I had kind of add these together here, but is there any leaders? I know you've mentioned a lot of different books, a lot of leaders that you've, you know, looked through, but is there any one leader in particular that you felt like has been really inspiring?
Yeah. Oh, I might lose some people with this one. And that's okay. Tony Robbins. And not for the reason people are going to think. Because Tony Robbins I've met him personally. I've seen him in a personal space. I've seen him when no one else was looking, you know, working as a volunteer on the crew. So the way that Tony Robbins events work, which I really love this, is once you've been to an event, you can come back and volunteer and you get to be there for free and they don't pay you, but they feed you really well. It's super pumped up. You learn a bunch of stuff. Like they do a lot of personal development. I really love it. There are people who are like, he should be compensating you. And I get that. The days are really grueling. The one thing that I don't take from him is just how dang hard he works and how many hours he works. Right? Like I am a 6-hour girl. He's like a 16-hour dude and that's fine. And the integrity that I saw went all the way through, right? Like talking to the people who work really closely with him, seeing how he interacted with people when he was off stage, that felt really cool because the guy's a billionaire, right? He doesn't have to do any of this. He doesn't have to be on stage for 16 hours teaching people and coaching people. Like his vocal cords are destroyed. And yet he keeps doing this because He loves it.
Talk about zone of genius.
Zone of genius. And one of the other things I saw him do that really inspired me is, number one, he shares the stage. So he actually makes sure he stays in his zone of genius, and the places that he could teach, but it's more his zone of excellence, he lets other people step into their zone of genius and teach at his conferences, lead and coach at his conferences. I think that's really cool. And then the last piece is, I watched him at one of the events I was at where I was a participant. I watched him coach somebody for 2 hours who was really stuck, committed to their story of trauma, and was unwilling to look at it from any other direction. And he tried. And y'all, if you've never been at one of his events, he can convince anybody to do anything. Like, he has the capacity. He knows how to manipulate people. And he said that. He's like, look, we've been at this for 2 hours. In the past, if I had somebody who was as resistant as you, and I was trying to get them to walk through a door, and we worked for it for 2 hours, I would have kicked you through that door. I would have manipulated you through that door. And what I found over decades is, when I do that, you walk back through the door. You revert because you didn't take the steps yourself. He's like, so I'm going to be done. I am done trying to convince you or help you walk through this door. If you decide later you want to walk through it, you let me know. You let my team know. And I was like, we can do that. It's like, oh,
yeah.
I don't want to manipulate anybody into change. I'm a master manipulator. You know this. You see,
without consent. Like,
but I don't want to manipulate anyone without their consent. I don't even want to manipulate people with their consent if they're like, fix it for me, do it for me.
Right.
And I think that really applies to leadership too, because I don't want to lead people through coercion or manipulation without your enthusiastic, active consent. So yeah, I know that there's a lot of, like, there's been some stuff in the media about him, and I don't know if any of that is true or not. I am a big proponent of believing victims or people that say that they have been harmed. And I also know that people are really complicated, and I've harmed people, and I've done things that I hope nobody writes an article about me about, because I wouldn't be very proud if they were released. And I think leadership really is like that. I'm going to be the same person in private that I am in public.
I think that's awesome. I think that is so huge, really being that authentic person.
Yeah. Okay. So last question, because we've been talking for a hot minute.
All right. Well, how about go kind of a little opposite here? What about what is the most difficult aspect of leadership for you?
Oh my gosh.
Hate to end on a difficult note, but
I love this question, because I think the most difficult thing sometimes is I really don't want to be responsible. The most difficult thing sometimes is, like, I do want to cancel all my calls and stay in bed. I do want to watch Netflix all day. Like, I do want to, like, when people are mean or rude, I do want to pop off. Like, I do sometimes want to start a fight. I do sometimes want to, like, just go into disempowered mode and make everything other people's fault and blame other people. I'm human, and I have emotions and feelings, and like, I sometimes I don't want to. And so I think the most difficult thing is doing it when you don't want to, and going, you know what? One of the questions I ask myself is this. I say, is my future self going to be happy that I'm making the decision I'm making?
That's a great way to
are they going to be like, thank you for doing it like this? That prevents me from saying things I don't want to say on social media. That prevents me from just stepping in a bunch of places that I don't want to step in. So it's the most difficult piece. And also that's the piece that I really love helping other people develop as well, because that's what I've developed over the last year. I feel like now if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. If I say I'm not going to do something, I don't, most of the time. And if I do make a mistake, I own it and I take responsibility for it, and I clean up whatever messes I've made. And I'm also not mean to myself anymore, where before I used to, like, I don't like this term, but I think it tracks. It's like I used to be self-flagellate, like beat myself up over it. And I don't really do that as much anymore.
No, you've been doing really great with that.
Oh, thanks, babe. Okay. So we're going to have some really, really cool conversations with other people moving forward. And if it feels good for you to get details on the conference, you can head to the show notes below. Oh my gosh, something just flew in my face like a bug. Okay, TLC got it. It's all good. I love just recording podcasts with you because it's just utter chaos around our house. And I'm like, it's fine. The kids are leading themselves. It's all good. The dog's leading himself. They're good. They're fine. And so if you want to check out the conference, you can do that in the show notes. If there's a part of this that really resonated with you, we would love to hear about it. So send us a message. Let us know. And now we're going to go have a fun birthday weekend.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, y'all, for listening. Thank you for interviewing me, babe.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Love you.
Having you on.
All right. Bye, y'all. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Invitation to head to our show notes to check out the offers and connections we mentioned. Or you can just head straight over to institutefortrauma.com and hop in our email list so that you never miss any of the cool things that we're doing over at the Institute. Invitation to be well and to take care of yourself this week, and we'll see you next time.